The children just growing and developing.
Well, good evening, councillors, members of the gallery and our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name's John Kavanagh and I'm the Mayor of the City of Moreland. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting. Next is a motion has been submitted by Councillor Martin. Is it as printed in the agenda?
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay. So Councillor Martin is moving what's printed in the agenda. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Yildiz, thank you. And Councillor Martin.
Yep, so firstly I'd like to just really acknowledge the work that our counterparts over in Darebin have done in this space. They are really trailblazers in this area and in recognising this as a really important issue and really allowing us to learn from them in the process. What we're asking for, and as leaders in our community, we're aware of the impact that climate change is having on our environment, and we are aware of the imminent threat that it poses to not just our food systems, but our health and the health and well-being of the most vulnerable members in our community. And I really actually would like to thank Councillor Tapanos for sending me the definition the other day of the word emergency, because what it does, the definition of the word emergency is a dangerous situation requiring immediate action. And the synonyms of emergency are crisis, urgent situation, and extremity. And these are things that we are recognising and we are seeing in our community right now. We have beaches down on the Great Ocean Road that are eroding week by week. We have bleaching of our Great Barrier Reef. We have bushfires in the middle of winter. We recognise that we're having more and more intense heat waves. We're having flooding. These things are happening to us and we are aware of it. We are aware that we are at an ecological tipping point and that we have a limited amount of time to act. Now, as council, we have taken quite a lot of action in this area, and I acknowledge the work that we've already done in this space and our ongoing partnership with the Moreland Energy Foundation, which enabled us to have our zero carbon evolution strategy. The other work that we have done, including the urban heat island effect, food systems, procurement, divestment, water map, waste and litter, integrated transport, cooling communities, and urban forest strategies. These are all steps that we are taking to mitigate the effects of what is a climate emergency. So I really implore my fellow councillors here today to actually stand with us and stand with Darebin and stand with now a number of cities across the world that are recognising that we are at this point, we are at a climate emergency. And I just would like to finish with the one quote that is actually written in our Zero Carbon Evolution Plan, and that is from Ban Ki-moon, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, and that is, we are the first generation to be able to end poverty and the last generation that can take the steps to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So, councillors, I implore you to support this motion.
Okay, before I move to the seconder, just a reminder that councillors that we need to stick to the topic and not personalise it too much. Thank you. Councillor Yildiz.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Okay. Councillor Abu.
Thank you. So, this is not just a local problem. This is a problem for the whole planet. And the implications for each of us not doing anything is like when there's a big demo at the city and you think to yourself, I might not go. And then you remember that if you're not the only person that decides not to go, nobody goes and nothing gets done. So I'd like to draw attention to something that really struck me, because I'm kind of concerned with how farming happens, which is that right now, probably tomorrow night, as Hurricane Florence, which is being billed as the strongest storm to ever make landfall, with winds of up to 209 kilometres per hour, has caused over 1 million people and their mobile homes to be evacuated from the path of this storm. It's caused the largest pig abattoir in the world to be evacuated and closed down. That employs 4,500 people. So they're not working today. They're not, the pigs, last time a storm hit this area, the dead pigs were floating down the river. This storm is expected to go over half a dozen nuclear power plants. It's expected to drop 600 millimetres of rain over industrial waste sites, pits holding coal ash and huge lagoons full of animal waste. If this is not an environmental emergency, then we probably haven't grasped the idea of emergency at all. I couldn't come to terms with this at all, but this figure says 2,500 billion, which is how many cubic metres of ice have melted in the last 25 years, and half of that ice melted in the last 12 years. What's happening is storm surges are hitting the Antarctic, where the floating ice is gone. They're hitting the ice shelves and they're fracturing the ice shelves, causing the glaciers to be able to reach the water quickly, which is resulting in sea rise. Now, back to the local level, I have friends who live in Tathra. In the last 6 months, they've had to evacuate and be on a watch and alert alarm. One of those episodes happen in the middle of winter. I have friends who live in Canberra that are just resigned to the fact that it just doesn't rain there anymore. All through New South Wales, farming communities are collapsing because there is no rain. They're rediscovering stuff that hasn't been taken into account and needs to be addressed again, like burying grain, like burying hay so that they can dig it up and feed it. You know, lambs are being born, you know, a sheep is having 2 lambs, but it can't support either of the lambs, and the lambs are having to all be taken away and be babysat by a boy who's at boarding school, because who would stay on a farm when farms are in drought? The whole system is collapsing, and if this is not an emergency and we don't do something, then I don't know what it looks like.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Councillor Tapanoff. Right, a reminder to you as well, sir.
After hearing my fellow councillors, I must admit I'm a little bit scared about the impending disaster and emergency. We're hearing that pigs are floating down the river, or lambs are needing to be cared for by others. This is the nature of the debate,
yes, it is. I know. Okay.
The nature of the debate that's occurring, and it is frightening stuff, and it's quite scaring stuff, and we should all be so concerned. But I'm wondering, what are we actually doing about it? Because it seems to me this motion not to have much substance at all. It's a declaration, and that's all. At least our counterparts in Darebin actually had a conference. So, I mean, if I've ever seen a feel-good motion in this chamber, this must certainly be one where we can get up here and make this drastic declarations of emergency. The world is collapsing, but yet all that we are seeking for is a declaration. A declaration. Surely, Mr. Mayor, that this motion should at the very least be calling for an update of our municipal emergency management plan. Now, that is the management plan that we undertake emergency response to. Surely, if all these things are a dire need in our city, we can effectively indicate through our emergency management plan that we need to take drastic action, inform ambulance, fire stations, local authorities, services and police. This is what the declaration of emergency will do. On the contrary though, what we should be doing, and what we are doing, and thank you for bringing it to my attention, because it's already on the agenda 2 and 3 times already today alone, is implementing those policies that we've already spoken about, our carbon reduction policies, investing real money into local change, solar panels, planting more trees. It is these motions that I want to be debating this late at night, the ones that actually do things, not just bland declarations of emergencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Did you want? Yes, Councillor. Councillor Rowley.
After attending the conference today and with expecting our Spark conference to happen next week, it's quite evident we are doing things, and this motion is intended to try and reframe the situation and obviously it brings out some passion in us and gets emotional reactions. And in fact, we had psychologists for Safe Climate today talking to the conference about that, and we had some excellent communications people talking about how we can frame that and how we can work with some of those issues. So it's inevitable that's going to happen when you start to touch on these things. I think we have got much of the foundations, we are doing this kind of work, and we're trying to reframe it a bit because we have the United Nations already saying to us that after 2 years of since the Paris Agreement, the United Nations own environmental program put it like this: to date, we failed. And if you look at David Spratt, one of the other speakers today, he talked about the Paris text being a political fix, and this is where some of the passion gets into it, because we're actually, you look at all of the emission reduction commitments from all of the voluntary national commitments that have been declared so far, we're on a path to 3.4 degrees of warming, when we know that Paris is meant to say that we're getting to 2 or significantly under 2. And that would happen by 2100. That's only a couple of generations away. We're already, nearly to 2020. And that, more than 5 degrees is a high-end risk, and it includes carbon cycle feedbacks taken into account. So it just kind of gets worse. And as I said earlier tonight, really we should be sticking to around about 0.5 degrees of warming as an ideal level of warming that humans and other species can live and thrive in. So as much as this is a word or a title and it's a reframing, it is important to do that, because I think the way we communicate and engage with our own community is essential. And I'm not saying we aren't doing it. I think we are. We've got a lot of leaders here. Some of them are in the room tonight, and many of them are in the room today at the Northcote Town Hall. And when we put this up on the display board, it got an ovation from the audience. Now, obviously, that's preaching to the converted, but those people have read and very concerned, and they're passionate about it, and they would like to see Moreland line up with Darebin in terms of the framing of this. And I think we're both doing good work in that area. Both councils are competing around it, and I just would like to encourage that we could actually do that as well, to actually really give a sense of the importance and the need to act now and to build on what we're doing.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bolton.
Well, in response to Councillor Tapanos, if this was all we were doing, changing a few words, then yeah, sure, that wouldn't make any difference. But the intent of this is for action to go hand in hand with signing this climate emergency declaration. And in fact, even beyond the impact on the climate and people and other living animals that have been mentioned by other people in the chamber so far, there's also even the fact that can we afford, like financially as a community, afford to deal with all of these disasters, hurricanes beyond what we've experienced before, bushfires which are of a scale that we haven't seen before. Like, things are at a much higher scale, and there has been in media very little linking between these disasters and droughts and climate change. So I'm definitely in support of this motion. I think it's a signal of the direction we want to go in. I think there are other things we need to do in addition to this, which will go hand in hand along with this. So I'm certainly in support of it. I don't think it is just a motherhood statement. I've been very opposed to just motherhood statements on council, and I think this signals more than that, and it's up to us to put the more into the climate emergency acknowledgement.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Seeing I seconded the motion and everyone spoke, I thought...
You did get a chance, but...
Yeah, exactly, but it's self-explanatory. I mean, it is making a statement, but if we didn't get up and do this tonight, I think we'd be doing us injustice, because as a council, we reflect a lot of what's in the motion to start with. So, I mean, I think Councillor Martin mentioned the other councils, but we in particular are champions in this space. So whether we make this statement or not, it's just self-explanatory. I mean, I don't know why we need so much debate on something that makes us, puts us on the map for the right reasons, but also it's about our future generations. If we can't start eating and breathing this and acknowledging this in everything that we do, I don't think we're going to have a planet. You mentioned, Councillor Abood mentions I saw it yesterday on social media how the hurricane was about to make inroads, and I went, oh my God, just imagine living in that. I mean, we've got, the last 10 years has been the hottest it's ever been in the last 100 years. We need to respond to this, and if we're not all, as a council, especially standing up to this, then we're doing the community, we're doing the world injustice, I believe, because this is a massive statement for us as a council, which we're really only a dot on the map to be making this. It's not a motherhood statement. I think this is very important, and I congratulate Councillor Martin yet again. Well done.
Okay, any other speakers?
Mr. Mayor, can I move an amendment then, an additional dot point, if it's acceptable to the mover, considering I've heard the need for this and the passion around the chamber, that we add a dot point to amend our municipal emergency management plan to reflect this statement tonight.
Just before I ask if that's acceptable, can I get a comment from the CEO?
Just through the Mayor, the municipal emergency management plan is really about how the different services get together in the event of a specific municipal emergency. They may come as a result of climate change or other cause. I'm sort of hesitating about it because its purpose is a different purpose. And just looking at the director as well, who looks after that, similarly, its purpose is different. It's very much about the operations of what our response is when an event occurs, regardless of whether it's created by one factor or not. So it's hard for me to advise anything other than that.
Do you still want to go on with it?
Yeah, I do, because from what we're hearing around the chamber, there is clearly a need to address natural disasters.
We're not debating it. I'll just see if it's acceptable to the mover and seconder. Is it acceptable to the mover and seconder?
No, it's not.
Okay. Okay.
Where's the action?
Okay. Okay.
Maybe it is just a
Your other option is to find a seconder to the motion, and then we'll debate that and then come back to the substantive if you want, or you could let it lapse.
Well, is there a seconder?
Well, but it's not acceptable to the original movement. Does Councillor Tapanos have a seconder for his amendment? Therefore, it lapses. Thank you. All right, so we go back to the substantive motion, and I think, did you want to close the debate? Or you have
I can just say briefly, just
to make sure we stick to the debate.
Yes, I just want to highlight for those in the gallery who are watching, point 2 highlights to receive a briefing from officers on how best to act on the climate emergency acknowledgement and to ensure that it is embedded into future strategies and in the next council action plan. So what we're actually doing is recognising that Darebin has the climate emergency plan, recognising that Moreland is already doing plenty of fantastic work in that space. But what we need to do is we actually need to work with our officers to actually work out, well, how do we do this? How do we best mitigate this problem? And I really do thank the councillors in this room for their enthusiasm to act on this emergency and really look forward to the unanimous support in the chamber to actually develop further climate emergency plans.
Thank you, Councillor. That closes the debate. I'm going to put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Doesn't go far enough.
You're voting in favour?
Oh, I always was in favour. I said it didn't go far enough, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry. I apologise. And against? Yeah, thank you. That can be recorded as unanimous, please. Thank you. Right, we move to notice of motion 4118.